Greetings, my dear viewers. Welcome back to Dungeons & Dragons Character Concepts. I am your host, Drahan, and today we are going over the Unearthed Arcana race from Gothic Lineage's the Dhamphir. That's right, I'm not limiting myself to just the normal Dungeons & Dragons races. I'm also be going over the Unearthed Arcana, because for all we know, they will become playable races in the future. Anyway, the Dhamphir is an interesting race, to be sure, from these few pages that we get. More or less, the Dhamphir is the vampire spawn as a playable race. However, unlike the vampire spawn, the Dhamphir seems to have free will. Hence why it's one of the races you can play as. And to make things a little bit more interesting, they had some diverse choices for creating your own Dhamphir. The first one being the hungers, which there are some cool ones and then there are some questionable ones. We have blood, of course, making you a vampire. That makes sense. Flesh and raw meat, that's cool. That would mean that you're making more of a Wendigo style of character. That's still pretty cool. Psychic energy is another interesting one. That means you're a mind drinker vampire. Like Mirko Vosk, the mind drinker. Dreams is another interesting one. I'm not exactly sure how that would work. It would definitely be interesting for a Kalishtar Dhamphir. Or even a rivalry between these two. Life energy would make you more of a succubus or an incubus. We covered that a few videos ago. But, there are two that are just odd. Esoteric humors. I don't exactly know how you can feed on humor. And the color from one's appearance. Not exactly sure how that would work either. But, those aren't the two weirdest. The most weird hunger from this list is cerebral spinal fluid. That's just odd to me. I'm not exactly sure what creature would need to feed on this type of fluid, but it's odd. It's odd to say the least. I mean, it's different, probably unnecessary. For me, I would probably take off the spinal fluid, the esoteric humors, and the color from one's appearance, and just run with the others. The other 5 are just fine. It's just those 3 that don't make much sense. Another way you could differentiate your Dhamphirs is your origin. And I really like this. This definitely differentiates from what I first thought Dhamphir was going to be, and that was just a half vampire. But these origins are pretty good. I especially like... Let's see, which one was it? It was... yes, number 2. You're packed with a predatory deity, fiend, fey, or spirit causes you to share their hunger. That's pretty cool. That automatically ties us to a warlock. So that is pretty darn cool. Now, speaking of which, let's go ahead and get straight into things with the backgrounds. Now, we don't get much information on Dhamphir for Dungeons & Dragons, so I have to work with vampire spawn since they are the closest thing. And for me personally, that would mean either the noble, spy, or acolyte. Now for Dhamphir, thanks to these origins, Haunted One and Urchin are also pretty good choices. For classes, going mostly off of the vampire spawn, Rogue and Bard and Fighter are going to be the closest we can think of. Now, Paladin is more leaning towards what I originally thought the Dhamphir was, and that being half vampire. Having an oath to go against your lineage. It would be really good, in my opinion. Alright, so now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into things with Rogue. Now, what Rogue subclasses would work for Dhamphir? Personally, Arcane Trister, Assassin, Inquisitive, and Mastermind come to mind. But also the Phantom, Scout, and the Soul Knife would also work for the Dhamphir. But the Soul Knife would only work if you have the hunger for psychic energy or dreams. In my honest opinion, you do with what you will. Moving on to Druid, and I only thought of this before today. But this makes perfect sense. Because with the Druid, you're able to change shape into an animal, which is what a lot of vampires are known for. And if you go with Circle of the Moon, it would fit so much more. And the Circle of Dreams Druid would actually fit with that one origin I thought was really cool, when you had your origins tied to a Fey of some sort. Alright, moving on to Bard. Now, vampires have been known to be very manipulative. Enchanting, even. Beguiling. So having a bard would actually make sense, since that's their whole setup. For colleges, I would recommend the College of Eloquence, Blades, or Whispers. Next we have Monk. Now, Monk's going to be a little bit more difficult, but I can see the monastic traditions of Long Death and Shadow fitting in with the Dhamphir style. Moving on to Fighter, Champion, Samurai, and even the Knight from Unearthed Arcana are going to work best with the Dhamphir. Now, if you hunger for psychic energy or dreams, a Psi Warrior might be your next best bet, since they have a lot to do with psionics. Moving on to Paladin, the Oaths of Devotion, Vengeance, and the Oathbreaker are very good choices, and the Oath of Treachery from Unearthed Arcana would also make sense, but more if you're trying to build a Cast the Betrayer style of character. Now, Sorcerer is going to be next on our list, and for the origins, I would recommend Shadow or the Aberrant Mind if you hunger for psychic energy or dreams. And actually, one of the origins talks about a parasite that failed to take hold of you completely, but you still hunger because of this parasite. And that reminds me a lot of the Mind Flayer tadpoles. So that could be a good build. Have an Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, Dhamphir, who was a failed attempt at Ceramorphosis. But some of the Ceramorphosis was still left behind. Now, Wizard, once again, vampires are enchanters, begulers, so having a wizard would actually fit well, especially since Strahd's monster stat block has wizard levels, if I remember correctly. Now, for the School of Wizard, now you want to go with, I would recommend the School of Enchantment and the School of Illusion, since those are the two types of spells that vampires would excel at. Moving on to Warlock. Now, for me personally, I see that the Fiend, Undying, Undead would be obvious choices for a vampire, or Dhamphir, to take to gain their vampirism. That's what they did. They made a deal with one of these patrons to become immortal, but it kind of monkey-pawed and they become a Dhamphir. Now, Hex Blade would be another interesting choice. I would see this as your Dhamphir coming across the Sword of Khass, and it somehow turns you into a Dhamphir. But you still have a pact with the Hex Blade. Now, we also have the Fey Warlock listed here because of that one origin with a patron of the Fey. So I went ahead and dropped it in here just to tie in with that origin. Now, another one that I would like to take a look at is Blood Hunter. This is one of my favorite classes, and I think it would fit quite well with the Dhamphir. For your order, either the Lycan or the Mutant would best fit. And unfortunately, that is all the time I have for you today, my dear viewers. I hope you did enjoy this video, and if you want to give it a like, go right ahead. Also, make sure to leave in the comments of what you would like to see next time. Until then, this has been Drehan, and I am offline.